here is a painting that is a must-try for every beginner. Or if you're not a beginner, but you just don't have a lot of time to do a complicated painting, you can do this one. Your first step is to take some low tack tape and paint your paper all around to avoid buckling. And use a palette, any palette. I'm using just an egg carton. It's very economical. And here are some of my brushes. A large mop brush for adding water to my paper. And here's a natural hair brush. Also, I can use for a very watery consistency in my paint. And then I'm going to use a detail brush because I'm going to be doing a tree and I want to do small branches. And this is just a regular round brush that I'm going to use for a lot of the painting. And then a pointed round, which has a little bit longer tip. So here are my brushes, and the first thing that I'm going to do is get my paint started. So I am going to be using Ultramarine Blue for the sky or the background, and I need to get it going first, especially if you're working from a pan. In your pans, you have to get the paint going first before you start anything. So I'm getting it into a soupy consistency, but since I'm doing a sky and it's going to be very light, I'm adding more and more water. So I'm adding the water with the natural hair brush. Now I'm going to take this mop brush and I'm going to add just clean water over my paper, leaving just the bottom, maybe an inch at the bottom where I'm not adding water. So I have water from the top down, and then leaving a little bit at the bottom of my painting where I'm going to have dry paper, because that I don't want my paint to go into that area. Now I'm adding ultramarine blue paint into the area that is already wet. It's called wet into wet technique. Notice how I'm using very little pressure as I add the paint. I am almost like I'm petting a cat. I'm doing it very softly. I'm just dabbing the paint across my paper and leaving some areas where I don't have any paint, because those are going to be where there's wispy clouds. Now it's time to blow dry. Alright, so notice this area here where we have some beautiful wispy clouds because of the way the paint and the water reacted with each other. I love that. And I moved the camera a little closer so you can see really what I'm doing. We are going to use French Ultramarine Blue and Burnt Sienna for the entire painting. And these are the colors that we're going to get by mixing them together, and we're going to use that throughout the painting. We have some browns, some grays, some darker blues, and we're getting all that from just 2 colors. So I'm going to use just my round brush. I think it's 4 or 6, I can't really read it. And then this is a detail brush. I'm going to use those 2 brushes. First I'm going to start with the round brush, and now I'm going to get my burnt sienna going, and I'm going to get it into a soupy consistency so that I can start mixing. And I want to get it in a soupy consistency and then take little bits of the blue and mix it into it so that I get a nice gray. I'm going to be using that color in some areas, but I'm also going to start with a lighter version of that, so I'm just adding water to that to get it lighter. So the water essentially is, instead of using white paint in acrylics or oils, I'm just using water to lighten it up. Now we're going to do the tree, and I hope you paint along with me, because if you paint along we can get this whole tree done. I'm going to start at the bottom and I'm going to pull up with a line. And I'm not pressing down too hard. Like I said, it's like you're petting a cat. It's very light touch. And I'm just going to pull up, and now I'm going to pull down. And notice I'm getting wider as I get down to the bottom. So So this is going to be essentially the base of the tree trunk. It's not a pure brown, it's not a gray, it's just a very, very light grayish brown. And I'm just going to do the whole thing, and at the bottom I'm getting a little bit wider. Now I'm going to put another branch that's going to be like a V at the top where it splits. Actually, it looks like a Y, I guess. So I'm going to have one center trunk with a branch coming off, and now I'm taking my detail brush and I'm going to do several other branches. Let's do them together. So one about halfway up is going to go straight out and down. I'm going to do another one around the same spot but on the other side, straight out, kind of reaching up towards the sun, I guess. So it's going up a little bit. And here's another one. And notice they're not straight lines. They kind of, I go a little bit and then I stop, and then I go a little bit of a different direction, and then I stop and I go a little bit of a different direction, so that they're not all just straight lines. So go up, stop, go a different direction, up, you know, make it squiggly. Or not squiggly, but zigzag-ish. So there's one that's kind of overlapping another. And then I'm going to go, as I'm going up to the top, they angle up more. So they're angling up, but then they're like a zigzag shape. And I'm going to do one here. I'm going to angle up, a little bit of a zigzag. I'm going to go for one from here. I'm going to go up and zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. And that's going to be the start. I need one or two or three down here going out. And see, these ones are going to go facing down. The ones at the bottom are going at an angle down. The ones at the top are going at an angle up. Now, on each one of the branches that I've already done, I'm going to have it split off at the top again, and then split again, and then split again. So I'm going to go to the top and have it split again, split again, split again. Go to the top of this one, have it split, split again. This one, have it split, split again, split again. This one's have it split, split again. Just for these smaller branches at the top. This one I'm going to have it split, split again. I'm just going to go around and do that to add little branches all around the top, the tips of these ones. So I'm going to have that split, have that one split, and split again. I'm just going to keep going around. Maybe I'll add another one right here because I feel like it needed one. This is really how the tree branches look. In the summertime, you don't see this because of all the leaves, but this is the perfect time of year in the winter to really observe trees. As you're driving home or as you're looking out your window, really look. Now, of course, every tree is different and you have different kinds of trees, oak trees, birch trees, pine trees, chestnut, all different kinds. But just observe them to see what they really look like in real life. And that will help you when you're trying to paint a realistic looking tree. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to decide in my scene, where is the sun coming from? Okay, is it coming from the left side? Is it coming from the right side? In my imagination, in this scene, the sun is coming from the right. And it's going to be coming from like an upper right area. So that means my shadow is going to be to the left. So on the tree trunk, to make the tree trunk look more rounded and give it form, I'm going to take some ultramarine blue and mix it with my burnt sienna and make it a soupy consistency, and start by darkening the left side of the tree. Now, notice how it looks like a marker line. It has too hard of an edge, but I want the outside edge to be hard, but I want the inside edge to be soft. So I'm gonna just add a little bit of a damp brush along the inside edge of this dark line. And I'm gonna get a little more paint, and I'm just going to lightly add a little, not the really dark paint, but a little bit of a watery wash on the inside edge to darken it up. Okay, it still looks a little bit like a marker line on the edge, so I'm going to take a little bit more of the darker with the Ultramarine Blue and Burnt Sienna mix, and I'm going to just dab it along the side, kind of gradually bringing it in towards the middle of the tree. And I'm going to go under these branches, and under each branch on the left hand side of the tree I'm going to bring up some dark. So I'm going to have it dark all along here and all along the left hand side. So under each branch on the left hand side I'm going to dab in some of this dark. Now my tree is still a little bit damp from before when I painted it, so it's drawing the color in towards the middle of the tree, which I kind of like how that looks. So this is how I'm shading the tree trunk, and I'm giving the tree trunk form. Now I got to think about the branches. So where is my sun coming from? It's coming from the right hand side, and it's coming from the upper right hand side. So the shadow is going to be on the left, and it's going to be on the bottom of each branch, because the sun is on the upper right, so the shadows are going to be on the bottom of each branch and maybe to the left of each branch. It's really just to give the branches some thickness, some roundedness, and also to have variety of shading throughout all my branches to give them a little bit more of a realistic look. So I'm kind of just taking my brush. See how I did a darker line on the bottom? Well, all of a sudden that brings that branch forward, and it also gives it a little bit of a thickness. If I go darker on the bottom side, it gives it a little bit of a 3D look. Look, that one looks like it's behind because I did the color on the bottom of it, but then I skipped over the other branch, and now it looks like it's behind. Now, if you can follow me along and do this on your painting, this is how you go from a super beginner to a budding artist. You're making it look more realistic. You're making it look more 3D. And so that's what we're working on here. We're just mixing two colors, very basic. We're getting it kind of dark, and it's all about value and value ranges. So in this area, value is how dark and how light something is. So notice how I'm going up, all the way up on the left-hand side of the trunk, in between the branches, and I'm making it darker. And it's going to be giving our tree trunk some form. Right here, I'm going to blend it out. See, and I'm leaving it light where the branch is attached to the tree. Okay. So let's look at this branch up here. The sun is from the right, so I'm going to shade the left-hand side of the branch, just like that. And I'm going to make it a little bit darker at the bottom where it reaches the trunk. And then I'm going to just smooth out the edge with a damp brush. See how I put my brush in the water, dabbed it on a paper towel. I just got it damp, and I'm just softening the inside edge. Now here I'm getting it even darker, and I'm going to do that over here too. As I go around doing this on all of the branches, you can see how it's starting to create form. And I'm still thinking the whole time, where is the sun? The sun is coming from that direction, so then this branch would be darker at the bottom. So I'm just going with my detail brush just on the bottom. This is how I'm making it look more realistic. You don't have to do this, but it just adds a little bit of different shades of color for interest, different values, and then it also makes it look 3D. And I'm still thinking, okay, the sun is coming from here, so then this side would be dark. See? So that's what I'm thinking as I'm going around. One little detail I'm going to do is right here on the bottom of each of these branches where it touches the trunk. I'm going to make it much darker. So I'm going to just make it very dark right under here and right under here and right under here, just to make sure that those are the darkest. Now right here I'm going to dab with a paper towel. And why am I doing that? Because I want to show that the sun is coming from the right. So I just dabbed out a little bit of a dark color on the right hand side that I had, just to lighten it up on the right hand side. So now I'm going to work on the trees way off in the distance. So first I'm going to take my burnt sienna, and it's a washy burnt sienna. It could be a little bit dirtied up with some ultramarine blue, but I draw a line going across. And it's kind of a washy consistency, like maybe the consistency of tea. And I'm going to pull up with my brush and pull up and flick. So when I pull up and flick, I get kind of pointy edges, so it could look like maybe pine trees way off in the distance. Now I'm going to go a little bit darker on the right hand side by adding a little more paint, a little less water. So you'll see as I go along, I'm going to add a little more paint and a little less water to make it a little bit darker on the right hand side. And I want to show variation of values on the left hand side. So I'm going to take some of that darker paint, and I'm going to just dab it in here and there to show maybe some form in some of these trees. And it's wet into wet, so it's going to just bleed in and blend in. And now I'm going to go a little bit darker. I added a little more ultramarine blue to my burnt sienna and just go a little bit darker at the bottom. So just to give it some depth, so the bottom has maybe some shadows. Now I'm going to take straight ultramarine blue with a lot of water, so a wash, and I'm going to start on a shadow because the sun is coming from the right hand side, hitting the tree, casting a shadow on the snowy ground. So it's going to have a cool shadow, a bluish cool shadow on the snow. And I'm going to pull it across, and I have to think of where some branches might be coming out, and that will be, but it's very light, and I'm using a brush stroke where I'm pulling it very lightly, almost, I'm not putting a lot of pressure, very light pressure, and I'm just dragging it across and making some branches sticking out. And that's what I'm doing here. As I look at it, I want to put the shadow of the two lower branches showing here too. So I'm really trying to mimic what the tree looks like in the shadow. I want to dab a little bit at the bottom here to make the tree trunk look wider at the bottom, and then maybe with just some blue, light wash blue, just some lumps of snow, just to give it a little bit of texture and realism here and there. Now after mixing both colors together with very little water, almost a black, I'm going to put maybe three little birds right there. And that's just like a little could do like a V, like a spread out V. And just do 1, 2, 3. Just like that, real small, with the tip of my brush. I'm not pressing too hard. Okay, and what else? I think I want, for balance, to have one of these pine trees in the distance stand to come forward a little bit. So I'm just going to put a little bit of burnt sienna, like a second layer of a wash to make it a little darker. And I'm just kind of pulling out one of these pine trees in the distance. And so it's a triangular shape, but it's pretty much a blob. I add a little bit of more ultramarine blue to make it a little bit darker, to make it more of like a grayish green. And I'm just going to really scumble along to make it look like a triangular shape with bumpy edges to make it look like a pine tree. Just pulling the pine tree forward with a second coat, but it's not really dark. It's very light. It's still a wash, but just because it's a second coat, it kind of pops forward. And I'm just going to do that, making the edges look like a pine tree. And there, we just painted this lonely little tree in a frigid winter. I'm going to blow dry and pull off the tape, which is the fun part. And let's see how it looks. Give this one a try.